Let me tell you about the day I learned that blood doesn't always mean loyalty. The day I discovered that raising a son with every ounce of love in your heart doesn't guarantee he'll protect yours. This is a story about Thanksgiving dinner, but it's really about betrayal. It's about entitlement. It's about the moment you realize the people you die for wouldn't even stand up for you. And let me be clear right from the start, this isn't a story about easy forgiveness. This isn't one of those heartwarming tales where everybody hugs it out at the end. No. This is about consequences. This is about boundaries. This is about what happens when you mistake an old man's silence for weakness, when you confuse his patience with stupidity, when you think his love makes him a doormat you can walk all over. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear is going to make your blood boil. It made mine boil. It still does. Even now, when I think back to that day, that godforsaken Thanksgiving day when everything I thought I knew about my family died right there at the dinner table. You know, people always talk about Thanksgiving like it's this sacred time, family gathering, gratitude, turkey and stuffing and pumpkin pie, the whole Norman Rockwell fantasy. But let me tell you something. Thanksgiving can also be the day when masks come off, when people show you exactly who they really are. And sometimes what you see behind those masks is so ugly, so cruel, so calculating that you wish you'd never looked at all. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me set the scene for you, because context matters. You need to understand where I was coming from. You need to feel what I felt walking into that house, my son's house in Arizona, where the heat outside could melt asphalt, but somehow the temperature inside felt colder than a January morning in Alaska. I'd driven 3 hours to get there, 3 hours through the desert, watching the landscape blur past my windows, excited, genuinely excited to see my boy, my son, the kid I raised alone after his mother passed, the kid I worked 2 jobs to support, the kid whose college education I paid for out of my own pocket while I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment and ate ramen 3 times a week, the kid I taught to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to treat people with respect and dignity, that kid, my son, the center of my universe for so many years, and my brother Tom, he'd been warning me, for months actually. Ever since I mentioned that my son and his wife had been acting distant, cold. My brother calls me every Sunday without fail, has for years, and he'd noticed the change in my voice when I talked about them. Something's off, he'd said. Protect yourself. That's when I started preparing. 6 months ago, when my gut and my brother's instincts both told me something was coming, I pulled up to his house 15 minutes early. 15 minutes, not an hour, not unannounced. 15 goddamn minutes early, and you'd think I'd committed a cardinal sin. The door opened, and there she was, my daughter-in-law. And let me tell you about her smile. It wasn't a smile, it was a corporate greeting, the kind a receptionist gives you when you're interrupting their day. Polite, plastic, cold. "Oh," she said, just that. "Oh." Like my arrival was an inconvenience, like I was a delivery she forgot she'd ordered. "You're early," she added, not moving from the doorway, not inviting me in, just standing there like a bouncer at a club I wasn't cool enough to enter. I checked my phone. 3:45 p.m. Dinner was at 4, 15 minutes. I'd driven 3 hours, and 15 minutes was too early? "Sorry," I said, even though I wasn't. Even though showing up a few minutes early used to be called being considerate. "I can wait in the car if that's better." No, it's fine," she interrupted, stepping aside finally, but her body language screamed that it wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. I walked in and immediately I felt it, that atmosphere. You know when you walk into a room and you can just sense something's off? When the air feels heavy, like there's pressure building before a thunderstorm? That's what hit me the second I crossed that threshold. The house was immaculate, too immaculate, like a showroom, like nobody actually lived there. Decorative pillows arranged just so on the couch. A centerpiece on the dining table that looked expensive and untouched. Everything beige and cream and carefully curated, soulless, cold. Nothing like the warm, lived-in home I'd raised my son in, where there were always dishes in the sink and photos on every wall, and life actually happened. But what really got me, what made my stomach tighten, was the dining table. It was set. Beautifully set, I'll give her that. China plates, crystal glasses, cloth napkins folded into little decorative shapes. And the food? The turkey, golden and perfect. Mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce, dinner rolls, and yes, pie. Apple pie and pumpkin pie sitting on the sideboard, untouched, pristine, like props in a photograph. But here's the thing, nobody was eating. My son was sitting at the head of the table, looking at his phone. His wife was fussing with the napkins, rearranging them even though they were already perfect. And the energy in that room, it felt rehearsed. It felt staged. It felt wrong. "Hey, Dad," my son said, barely looking up from his screen, not standing to greet me, not coming over for a hug, just, "Hey, Dad," like I was a coworker he saw every day and not his father who'd driven 3 hours to spend a holiday with him. That hurt. I won't lie to you, that hurt more than I want to admit. But I swallowed it. I forced a smile. I told myself I was being sensitive, that maybe he was tired, that maybe I was reading too much into things. "Hey, son," I said, walking over to him. I put my hand on his shoulder, squeezed it gently. He stiffened under my touch. Actually stiffened. Like my affection was uncomfortable for him, like I was a stranger invading his personal space. I pulled my hand back, sat down at the table where a place had been set for me. The chair was wooden, hard, uncomfortable, not the cushioned seat at the head of the table where my son sat. Not the plush chairs his wife had claimed for herself and positioned strategically throughout the room. No, I got the wooden one, the one that made your back ache after 10 minutes. A small thing, maybe. But small things add up. Small things tell you where you stand. "So," I said, trying to break the tension, trying to inject some normalcy into this bizarre atmosphere. "This looks amazing. You really went all out." His wife smiled that plastic smile again. "Thank you. I wanted everything to be perfect." Perfect. That word. She kept using that word, like perfection was the goal, like a perfect table setting mattered more than a warm welcome, like appearances were everything and substance was nothing. We sat there in silence for a moment, an awkward, heavy silence. I waited for someone to say, "Grace." We'd always said grace when my son was growing up. Always, it was tradition. But nobody moved, nobody bowed their head, nobody reached for anyone's hand. Finally, I cleared my throat. "Should we say grace before we eat?" "We don't really do that anymore." My son interrupted, still not looking at me, still scrolling through his phone like it contained the meaning of life and I was just background noise. "Oh," I said. "Okay, that's fine." And that's when I noticed it. The way they were looking at each other. My son and his wife. These little glances, these quick, furtive looks that people exchange when they're in on something together, when they're sharing a secret, when they're about to drop a bomb, and they're just waiting for the right moment. My gut clenched. My instincts, honed over decades of life, screamed at me that something was coming, something bad, but I didn't know what. Not yet. So I did what any father would do. I tried to engage. I tried to connect. "How's work going?" I asked my son. "Fine," he said. One word. "Not great, Dad. Let me tell you about this project I'm working on." Not challenging, but I'm learning a lot. Just fine. Dismissive. Detached. Final. "And you?" I turned to his wife, desperate now to fill this horrible silence with something, anything that felt like normal family conversation. "Busy," she said, her tone clipped. Then she stood up, walked to the kitchen, and started adjusting things that didn't need adjusting, moving the salt shaker 2 inches to the left, wiping an invisible spot off the counter, anything to avoid talking to me, anything to make it clear I wasn't welcome here. And my son just sat there, watching her, watching me, not saying anything, not defending me, not trying to make this easier, just sitting there like a spectator at his own family gathering, watching his father get frozen out and doing absolutely nothing about it. You want to know what that feels like? Let me tell you, it feels like drowning in slow motion. It feels like watching the ground crumble beneath your feet and having nowhere to grab onto. It feels like rejection and abandonment and heartbreak all rolled into one massive weight sitting on your chest, making it hard to breathe. But I didn't leave. I should have. God knows I should have stood up right then, wished them well, and walked out that door. But I didn't. Because I'm a father, because I loved my son, because I kept hoping that maybe I was wrong, maybe I was misreading everything, maybe this was just an off day and things would get better. They didn't get better. His wife came back to the table, sat down with that same rigid posture, that same cold expression. She folded her hands in front of her like a CEO about to deliver bad news to her shareholders. And that's when she spoke. That's when the bomb dropped. We have something we need to discuss with you. Not we have exciting news to share. Not we wanted to talk to you about something. No. We have something we need to discuss with you. The phrasing alone told me everything. This wasn't a discussion. This was a declaration. This was them informing me of a decision they'd already made. Okay, I said slowly, setting down my fork. I hadn't even taken a bite of food yet. The turkey sat there on my plate, cooling, untouched. What's going on? She glanced at my son. He didn't look at me. Just kept his eyes down, jaw tight, like a coward about to watch someone else do his dirty work. My parents are getting older, she began, and I felt my stomach drop because I knew where this was going. They can't live alone anymore. They need support. They need family. I nodded slowly. That's hard. I'm sorry you're dealing with that. Have you looked into assisted living facilities? There are some really good ones around here that specialize in, they're moving into your house. Just like that. Flat. Emotionless. Final. Like she was telling me the weather forecast and not upending my entire life. I blinked. Excuse me? My parents, she repeated, slower this time, like I was stupid, like I hadn't heard her correctly, are moving into your house. Next month, we've already started moving some of their things in. The room tilted. I swear to God, the whole room tilted sideways for a second. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. What? We used the spare key you gave us last year for emergencies, she continued, her voice so calm, so matter-of-fact, like this was completely reasonable. We've been bringing boxes over for the past 2 weeks, setting up the guest room, making space. My mother needs a ground floor, and your house is perfect for that. I looked at my son. Finally, he raised his eyes to meet mine. And you know what I saw there? Nothing. No guilt, no apology, no remorse. Just a cold, determined look that said he'd made his choice. And that choice wasn't me. You went into my house, I said, my voice shaking now. Not with sadness, but with rage, with disbelief, with a fury so deep I could feel it burning in my chest. Without asking me, without telling me. You made decisions about my property, my home, my life, without even having the decency to discuss it with me first. You're alone, my son said, and the words hit me like a slap. You live by yourself. You have all that space. It only makes sense. Only makes sense. Only makes sense. It makes sense, I repeated, my voice rising now. It makes sense to you to take my emergency spare key, invade my home, move strangers into my house, and tell me about it after the fact? They're not strangers, his wife snapped. And there it was, the first crack in her corporate composure. They're my parents. They're family. They're your family, I shot back. Not mine. I've met them twice. Twice in the 3 years you've been married to my son, and now you're telling me they're moving into my house? It's what families do, she said, leaning forward now, her eyes hard, her jaw set. They take care of each other. Or is that a foreign concept to you? Low blow. Such a low goddamn blow. Because she knew I'd raised my son alone. She knew I'd sacrificed everything for him. She knew I'd been both mother and father after my wife died. And here she was, questioning my understanding of family, questioning my commitment. I know what family is, I said through gritted teeth, and family doesn't ambush each other with life-changing decisions. Family doesn't treat each other like employees to be managed. Family talks, family discusses, family respects boundaries. Boundaries? She laughed. Actually laughed. A cold, brittle sound. You want to talk about boundaries? You're a grown man living alone in a 4-bedroom house. That's selfish. That's wasteful. My parents need help, and you have the space. End of discussion. End of discussion. End of discussion. I turned to my son, desperately searching his face for any sign of the boy I'd raised. The boy who used to climb into my lap when he had a nightmare. The boy who told me I was his hero. The boy who promised me at his mother's funeral that we'd always have each other's backs. Son, I said quietly, and my voice cracked on that word, broke right in half like my heart was breaking. Is this really what you want? He didn't even hesitate. Dad, you're being dramatic. It's a practical solution. She and I have talked about this extensively. Don't, I said, holding up my hand. Don't try to make this sound reasonable. You invaded my home. You made decisions about my life without including me. This isn't practical. This is control. His face darkened. We're trying to help you. You're alone in that big house. Having people there would be good for you, give you purpose. You brought her into it, I said, my voice rising. You brought everything into it by spitting on the values I raised you with. Everything we believed in, everything I taught you about respect and boundaries. What you taught me, he said, his voice cold now, rising to match mine, was that family is important. And I'm choosing my family, my wife, her parents, people who are actually here, actually present, actually part of my life now. He stopped, caught himself, but I saw it in his eyes. I saw the words he didn't say, words that would have destroyed me completely if he'd spoken them aloud. Just what? I whispered. Just what, son? Say it. He looked away. You know what I mean. No, I don't. Tell me. His wife stood up, moving to stand beside him, placing her hand on his arm like she was supporting him, protecting him from the big bad father who dared to object to having his life hijacked. You're old, she said simply, cruelly. You're alone. You don't have anyone, no wife, no other children, just that empty house and your memories. We're giving you purpose. We're giving you a chance to be useful again, to contribute, to matter. The air left my lungs. All of it, every molecule of oxygen just vanished, leaving me gasping, reeling, unable to process what I'd just heard. Useful. She wanted me to feel useful by letting her parents invade my home, by surrendering my autonomy, my privacy, my peace. And she framed it like she was doing me a favor, like I should be grateful. You already gave them access to my house, I said slowly, trying to piece together the full scope of this betrayal. What else? What else have you done? They exchanged another one of those looks, those conspiratorial, we're in this together looks that excluded me completely. We may have told them they could start moving in next weekend, my son admitted, his voice barely above a mumble. Next weekend, I repeated flatly. So in 5 days, 2 people I barely know are going to be living in my house, the house I bought, the house I paid for, the house where I've lived for 25 years, the house where your mother and I raised you, that house. Dad, and you thought, what? You thought you'd just tell me over Thanksgiving dinner? You thought you'd ambush me with this and I'd just, what? Smile and nod and hand over my life because you decided it was convenient for you? "We knew you'd react like this," his wife said, her voice dripping with condescension. "That's why we waited. We knew you'd be unreasonable." Unreasonable. I was being unreasonable. I stood there, looking at my son, at this woman he'd married, at this cold, calculated setup they'd orchestrated, and I felt something inside me crystallize, harden, turn from hurt into something else entirely. Because this wasn't just about the house. This wasn't just about her parents or spare keys or practical solutions. This was about respect. This was about autonomy. This was about whether I was going to spend the rest of my life being treated like a resource to be managed instead of a human being with rights and dignity and value. "You want to know what's unreasonable?" I said quietly. Too quietly, my voice dropping to a register that should have warned them both that they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. What's unreasonable is taking someone's emergency key and using it to invade their home. What's unreasonable is making life-altering decisions about someone else's property. What's unreasonable is thinking you can just bulldoze over another human being's wishes because you've decided you know better. "It's for the best," she started. "For who?" I interrupted. "For your best, for your parents' best, because it's sure as hell not for my best." "You're being selfish," my son said, and God, the disappointment in his voice, the judgment like I was the one in the wrong here, like I was the villain in this story. "Selfish," I repeated, and something in my chest cracked wide open. "I'm selfish. Your father, who raised you alone, who worked himself to the bone to give you everything, who supported every dream you ever had, who paid for your education, your wedding, who gave you $20,000 as a wedding gift. I'm selfish because I don't want strangers living in my house." "They won't be strangers for long," his wife said, and the smugness in her tone made my blood boil. "We're family now, all of us, and families make sacrifices." Sacrifices. That word. I looked at the table, at the perfect food no one was eating, at the decorative napkins and the crystal glasses and the whole theatrical production of this dinner. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't Thanksgiving. This was an intervention. This was a corporate takeover masked as a family meal. They'd brought me here to inform me, not to ask me. They'd already made every decision, already given out my keys, already told her parents they could move in, already packed boxes and started rearranging my house. My house, without asking, without caring, without any respect for me whatsoever. I stood up slowly, pushed back from the table, and that's when I felt it, the final straw. His wife reached across the table for the gravy boat, that heavy ceramic vessel, full of hot gravy, and before I could even process what was happening, she lifted it, and she poured it, deliberately, slowly, right onto my lap. The liquid soaked through my pants immediately, hot enough to make me gasp, not hot enough to burn, but hot enough to humiliate, to degrade, a physical assault disguised as an accident that wasn't an accident at all. "Oops," she said, not even trying to sound convincing. How clumsy of me. Old men don't get choices, do they? They get instructions. They get told what's best for them. They get managed. I looked at my son, waited for him to react, waited for him to say something, anything, to tell his wife that was unacceptable, that you don't treat people like that what she'd just done was assault, plain and simple. But he said nothing, just looked down at his plate, complicit, silent, weak, and that's when something inside me died. Not my love for him, that would take longer to fully extinguish, but my hope, my belief that he was still the boy I'd raised, my faith that somewhere inside this man was the son who'd once looked up to me like I hung the moon. I stood up slowly, carefully. The gravy dripped down my legs, stained my pants, left a puddle on their expensive chair. I reached for one of those decorative napkins, the ones she'd spent so much time folding into perfect little shapes. And I wiped my hands, and that's when I said it. The words that would define everything that came next. Respect isn't demanded, it's earned. And today, you two just earned something special. I walked to the window, pulled out my phone, made sure they could see me, made sure they understood this wasn't an empty threat, and I called my brother Tom. "Tom," I said when he answered, my voice steady, calm as death itself. "Change the locks, revoke all access, do it now." "What locks?" my son asked, his voice rising now. Panic starting to seep in. I ended the call, slid the phone back into my pocket, and I looked at my son, really looked at him, maybe for the last time as his father and not as a stranger he used to know. "You wanted my house?" I said softly. "You wanted access to my life, my space, my peace. You wanted to make decisions for me like I'm incompetent, like I'm a burden, like I'm some old man who doesn't get a say in how I live my final years." I walked toward the door. "Dad, what did you do?" My son was standing now, his voice cracking, finally showing some emotion. I stopped at the threshold, turned back, one last look at the son I'd raised, the son I'd loved, the son who just traded me for convenience. "I did what you should have done," I said. "I made a practical decision. I chose family, the family that actually respects me, the family that actually values me, the family that wouldn't steal my keys and colonize my home. My brother Tom has been co-trustee of my estate for 6 months now. Ever since I saw this coming, ever since he warned me to protect myself. And unlike you, he actually cares about my well-being." His wife's face had gone white. "You can't." "I can," I interrupted. "And I did. Months ago, actually. See, unlike you two, I plan ahead. I think things through. I don't just steamroll people and hope they'll comply. And by the time you get to my house, every lock will be changed. Every access code will be different. Every security measure will be activated. Your emergency key, useless. Your parents' boxes, still in my house. And you have exactly 48 hours to remove them with supervision, or I'm donating everything to charity." I smiled. Not a happy smile, not a forgiving smile, the smile of a man who just activated a plan that was going to show these people exactly what consequences look like. "Families do make sacrifices," I said softly, "and you just sacrificed me, so now you get to live with that choice." And I walked out, left that house with gravy on my pants and steel in my spine, left my son standing there finally understanding that actions have consequences, left his wife realizing she'd just lost a battle she didn't even know she was fighting. I got in my car and drove away from the biggest betrayal of my life. But I wasn't driving away defeated. I was driving toward peace. I walked out of that house, and let me tell you, the Arizona heat hit me like a physical force. But even that scorching desert air felt warmer than the atmosphere I'd just left behind. Even the sun beating down on the asphalt felt more welcoming than my own son's home. That's how cold it had been in there. That's how unwelcome I'd been made to feel. But here's the thing they didn't know. Here's what they couldn't possibly have understood about me. I'm not some doddering old fool who can be manipulated. I'm not some lonely widower desperate for purpose who will accept any scrap of attention, any illusion of being needed. No, I'm a man who spent 40 years in business, a man who learned the hard way that trust is earned and contracts matter, and you always protect your assets. So when my son got married 3 years ago, when I met this woman who smiled with her mouth but never with her eyes, when I saw how she looked at my house during her first visit, calculating, assessing, already measuring the rooms in her mind, I noticed. I filed it away. And over the next 2.5 years, I watched. I saw the pattern, the way she'd make comments about my big empty house, the way she'd joke about how I didn't need all that space, the way she'd casually mention her parents and their future care needs in the same conversation. And then 6 months ago, my brother Tom called me, our weekly Sunday call, and he said something that changed everything. "I don't like how they're treating you," he said. The way she talks to you, the way he lets her. Something feels wrong. You should protect yourself. That's when I knew. That's when I stopped hoping things would get better and started preparing for them to get worse. And I prepared. You want to know what I did? Let me break it down for you, because this is where the pain turns into something else. This is where the heartbreak hardens into steel. This is where the father stops bleeding and the strategist takes over. 6 months ago, I went to see my lawyer, my estate attorney, a woman I've worked with for 15 years, someone I trust implicitly. And I told her I wanted to make some changes. No, scratch that. I wanted to make a lot of changes. I want my house in a trust, I told her, an irrevocable trust. She looked at me over her reading glasses. That's a significant step. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said. I want it protected. I want it legally shielded so that no one, and I mean no one, can make claims against it. No one can take it from me. No one can force me to sign it over. No one can move into it without my explicit documented permission. Not even your son? She asked gently. Especially not my son, I said, and the words hurt coming out, but they were true. They were necessary. So we did it. We created the trust. My brother Tom, my younger brother, who actually calls me every week, who actually gives a damn about my well-being, who didn't raise a son who'd betray him, became the co-trustee. The house went into the trust. My name stayed on it, but legally it was protected, shielded, untouchable. But I didn't stop there. Oh no. Because I have learned that you can't just protect one asset and leave the rest vulnerable. You have to think holistically. You have to cover every angle. I transferred primary ownership of my investment accounts to my brother's name, with me as the beneficiary. I updated my will. I created specific clauses about who could and couldn't inherit what. I made sure that every single thing I owned, every asset, every account, every piece of property was legally protected from exactly the kind of scenario that had just unfolded at that dinner table. And the car. Oh, the car. Let me tell you about that car, because this is where it gets really interesting. 2 years ago, my son needed a car. His old one had died, and he didn't have enough credit built up to get a decent loan. So what did dear old dad do? I co-signed. I put my name on that loan. I helped him get that shiny new SUV he wanted, the one with all the bells and whistles, the one that cost $45,000. I'll pay you back, he promised. Every month. You won't have to pay a dime. And for a while he did. For about 6 months, the payments came through. Then they got sporadic. Then they stopped altogether. And guess who'd been paying that car note for the last 18 months? Yeah, me. The selfish old man who doesn't understand family, but here's what I did 3 months ago when the payments stopped and the excuses started. I stopped making the payments myself. I called the bank. I told them I would no longer be covering his defaults. I document every missed payment he'd made, every broken promise, every month I'd covered for him while he lived his comfortable life and planned to colonize my home. I couldn't remove myself as co-signer. That's not how loans work. But what I could do was stop enabling him, stop covering for him, stop protecting his credit with my wallet. And I made it very clear to the bank that any future defaults were on him, not me. The bank noted my statement, documented my notification, and the clock started ticking on his loan. Miss enough payments? Repossession, default on the loan. Both our credits take a hit, but at least I'd be done paying for a car he drove while disrespecting me. But we're not done yet, because there was more, so much more. I drove home that day in silence. 3 hours back through the desert, watching the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red and purple. Beautiful. Devastating, like a funeral for a relationship that had just died, because that's what happened back there. I didn't just lose a son, he lost a father, and unlike him, I understood the weight of that loss. I understood what it meant, what it would cost. When I got home to my house, the house I'd owned for 25 years, the house where I'd raised my boy, the house where my wife had drawn her last breath. I stood in the driveway for a long moment, just looking at it. This modest, comfortable, four-bedroom house that somehow represented everything wrong with me, according to my son and his wife. Too much space for one person. Wasteful, selfish, but it wasn't too much space. It was my space, my sanctuary, my peace. The place where I'd grieved and healed and rebuilt my life after losing my wife. The place where every room held memories I couldn't and wouldn't give up. My son's first steps in that hallway. My wife's laughter in the kitchen. Christmas mornings in the living room. Birthday parties in the backyard. Mine. And they thought they could just take it. Just move people in. Just make it theirs. Just erase me and my history and my right to my own goddamn life. I walked up to the front door. Tom had been true to his word. By the time I arrived home, he'd already contacted the locksmith. My phone buzzed with a text. Emergency locksmith on the way. Should be there in 30 minutes. I'm coming over too. That's family. That's loyalty. That's what my son should have understood, but didn't. While I waited, I pulled out my phone and opened the security camera app. Yeah, I'd upgraded to a security camera system 6 months ago. Right around the same time I started setting up the trust, right around the same time I started preparing for exactly this kind of betrayal. Coincidence? No. Foresight. High-definition cameras at every entrance. Motion-activated, cloud-stored footage, recording everything, every coming and going, every box they'd carried in, every assumption they'd made that this was okay. I sat down at my computer and pulled up the footage from the last 2 weeks, and there it was, all of it, evidence of their betrayal playing out in crystal clear video. Day 1, my son's wife letting herself in with my emergency spare key, looking around like she owned the place, opening closets, measuring rooms, taking photos. Day 3, both of them carrying boxes, moving furniture, setting up the guest room without asking, without calling, without any acknowledgement that this wasn't their property to do with as they pleased. Day 7, her parents showing up, older couple, looking confused, following their daughter through my house, like tourists on a guided tour. Her pointing out where they'd sleep, where they'd put their things, how perfect it would all be. Day 10, more boxes, more furniture, a recliner, a TV, personal items being unpacked and arranged. My guest room transforming into someone else's bedroom right before my eyes. I watched every second of that footage, and with each passing frame, any remaining doubt I had about my decisions evaporated. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't poor communication. This was calculated, deliberate, intentional. They knew what they were doing. They just didn't care what I thought about it. I saved every video, downloaded every file, backed it all up in multiple locations, because you never know when you might need evidence, when you might need proof that you're not crazy, not unreasonable, not the villain in this story. The locksmith arrived. A kind woman in her 40s who took one look at my face and asked, "Family trouble?" "You could say that," I said. "Say no more," she replied. "I've seen this before. Let's get you secured." She changed every lock. Front door, back door, side door, garage, every single entry point. New locks, new keys, state-of-the-art deadbolts. By the time she finished, my house was a fortress. Tom arrived just as she was packing up. He paid her, wouldn't let me argue about it, and she left with a sympathetic smile. My brother and I stood in my living room, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. "Tell me," he finally said. So I told him everything, the cold welcome, the ambush, the announcement, the gravy. God, the gravy. The humiliation of having hot liquid poured on me like I was nothing, like I was a problem to be managed, like I was so insignificant that physical degradation was an acceptable way to make a point. "She poured gravy on you," Tom repeated, his voice flat with disbelief. While my son watched and said nothing, I confirmed. Tom's jaw tightened. That's assault. That's what I thought. You could press charges. I could, I agreed, Ma, but I won't because legal action means staying connected to them, means court dates and lawyers and prolonged contact. And what I want, what I need is complete separation, total severance. I want them out of my life entirely. Tom nodded slowly. So, what's the plan? The plan, I said, is to let them come here. Let them try their new key. Let them realize they have no access, no power, no control. And then I give them 48 hours to remove their parents' belongings with supervision. After that, I donate everything. I'll supervise. Tom said immediately. You don't have to see them again if you don't want to. Thank you, I said, and meant it. You did the right thing, Tom said. And whatever happens next, I've got your back. See, that's family, that's loyalty. That's what my son should have understood but didn't. Family isn't about DNA. It's not about sharing a last name. It's about showing up. It's about respect. It's about having someone's back even when it's inconvenient. That night, I didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. Lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every word, every look, every betrayal. My mind kept circling back to one question. How did I raise a son who could do this? Where did I go wrong? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't go wrong. I raised him right. I taught him values. I showed him respect and love and integrity. What he became after that, that was his choice. His wife's influence, his own weakness, his decision to prioritize comfort over character. You can't control who your children become. You can only control who you are and how you respond when they disappoint you. And my response was going to be calculated, comprehensive, complete. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls, 12 from my son, 5 from his wife, no voicemails, just frantic callback attempts, desperation, panic. I didn't call back. Not yet. Let them sweat. Let them wonder what was happening. Let them lie awake at night the way I'd lain awake, trying to figure out what they'd done wrong. Except they already knew what they'd done wrong. They just didn't think there'd be consequences. Instead, I made coffee. Strong, black, the way I liked it. Sat on my back porch and watched the sunrise. My porch, my coffee, my peace, everything they'd tried to take from me. Around noon, they showed up. I watched them on the security camera, saw my son's car pull into my driveway, saw them get out, walk to the door with that entitled stride like they still had access. Like nothing had changed, they tried their key, the emergency spare key they'd been using for 2 weeks, the key that no longer fit the brand new locks. They jiggled it, tried again. Looked confused, they tried again. Same result. I watched my son pull out his phone, probably checking to see if he'd somehow gotten the wrong key, as if he didn't know exactly what was happening, as if he didn't understand that actions have consequences. His wife pressed the doorbell. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession, impatient, angry. I could have answered, could have opened the door and faced them, but I didn't because sometimes silence is more powerful than words. Sometimes making someone stand outside the home they tried to steal is consequence enough for the moment. My phone rang. My son, I watched him on camera, a phone to his ear. Desperate, I didn't answer. His wife started knocking, then pounding, her corporate composure cracking with each unanswered knock. They stood on my porch for 15 minutes, arguing with each other. My son looking defeated, his wife getting more and more agitated. At one point, she actually tried to peer through the window, shading her eyes with her hand like she could somehow force her way in through sheer will. Finally, they left, drove away probably to regroup, to plan their next move, to figure out how to regain control of a situation that was spiraling away from them. Good. Let them plan. Let them strategize, because I was 10 steps ahead of them, had been for months, and every move they made next was just going to dig them deeper into the hole they'd created. That afternoon, my phone rang again. This time, from a number I didn't recognize, I let it go to voicemail. Listen to the message. Mr. Peterson, this is Jennifer Martinez. I'm an attorney representing your son and daughter-in-law. They've asked me to call regarding access to your property and belongings currently stored there. Please return my call at your earliest convenience. So they lawyered up, fast, desperate, expensive. I called my own attorney first. Explained the situation, sent her the security camera footage, every clip, every timestamp, every moment of their unauthorized entry. This is clear-cut trespassing, she said after reviewing the videos. You have every right to deny them access and to require supervised removal of their belongings. I'll handle the other attorney. Thank you, I said. One question, she added, do you want to press charges for the trespassing or for the assault, the gravy incident? No, I said, I want them out of my life. Pressing charges means prolonged contact. I just want this over. Understood, she said. I'll make it clear they have 48 hours for supervised removal, and after that, you're donating everything. My lawyer called their lawyer. I wasn't part of that conversation, but I heard about it later. Apparently, their attorney had been told a very different story, that I'd given permission, that it was a family arrangement, that I was being unreasonable and vindictive. My lawyer sent the video footage. Their lawyer stopped pushing after that, probably advised them that fighting this would only make things worse, probably told them to cut their losses and move on. Probably sent them a bill that made them realize that trying to fight me was going to cost more than just accepting the consequences. 2 days later, a moving truck showed up. Tom came over to supervise, to make sure they only took what was theirs, to make sure they didn't try to steal or damage anything out of spite. I watched from inside, didn't go out, didn't face them, let Tom handle it, because seeing them would have required me to speak to them, and I had nothing left to say. My son looked like he'd aged 5 years, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped, the weight of consequences finally hitting him. His wife wouldn't look at anyone, just directed the movers with sharp, angry gestures. Humiliated, furious, defeated, they removed boxes, furniture, the recliner, the TV, her parents' belongings, every trace of their presumption, every reminder of their betrayal. My son tried to talk to Tom at one point. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I saw it through the window, saw my son's mouth moving, saw Tom shake his head, saw my son's shoulders sag even further. Later, Tom told me what was said. He asked me to tell you he was sorry, Tom said. Asked me to tell you they made a mistake. What did you say? I told him that apologies don't go through intermediaries, that if he wanted to apologize, he needed to do it face to face, man to man, but that I didn't think he had the courage for that. I nodded. Thank you. He asked if there was any way to fix this. Tom continued. I told him that trust takes years to rebuild, that he couldn't break something this badly and expect it to be fixed in a week, that he needed to focus on becoming someone worth trusting again before worrying about whether you'd ever trust him. What did he say? Nothing. Just got in the truck and left. When they finished loading the truck, when every piece of their invasion had been removed from my house, Tom and I stood in the empty guest room, the room that had almost become someone else's bedroom, the room that was mine again. You okay? Tom asked. Yeah, I said. I'm okay. No, you're not, he said gently. And that's okay too. You don't have to be okay right now. I feel empty, I admitted. Like there's this hole where my son used to be. There is, Tom said. But that hole was made by him, not by you. You didn't create this. You didn't want this. You just refused to be a doormat. And that's not wrong. That's healthy. Doesn't feel healthy, I said. It will, he promised. Eventually, not today, not tomorrow, but eventually you'll realize that losing someone who doesn't respect you isn't actually a loss. It's liberation. I wanted to believe him. Wasn't sure I did yet, but I nodded anyway. Tom stayed for dinner. We ordered pizza, sat in my living room, watched a game, Didn't talk about what had happened, just existed together. Two brothers, two men who understood that sometimes presence matters more than words. That night, I slept, really slept, for the first time since Thanksgiving. Exhausted, drained, but also relieved. Because my house was mine again, my space was my own. The invasion had been repelled, but the consequences weren't done, not even close. Because I'd protected my house and my belongings, sure, but there was still the matter of the car, the loan I'd co-signed, the payments I'd been making while they lived their comfortable life. And I'd stopped making those payments 3 months ago, which meant the bank was about to make a move. And when they did, my son was going to learn another very expensive lesson about what happens when you treat people like ATMs and assume they'll never turn off the money flow. 2 weeks after the moving truck left, the bank made their move. 2 weeks of silence, 2 weeks of me rebuilding my peace, 2 weeks of them probably thinking the worst was over, that they'd lost access to my house, but at least they still had their lives intact, their marriage, their possessions, their SUV. And then the bank called them. I wasn't there, obviously, didn't hear the conversation, but I can imagine it, can picture my son's face when the loan officer explained that the cosigner had stopped making payments 3 months ago, that he was now solely responsible for maintaining the loan, that his credit and mine would be affected if payments weren't made on time, that they were currently 60 days past due, that repossession was imminent, $32,000 still owed, on a vehicle he'd assured me he could afford, on payments he'd stopped making 18 months ago, on a loan I'd been covering out of my own pocket, while he and his wife lived their comfortable life and planned to colonize my home. The first call came within an hour of the bank notification. My son, panicked, desperate. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. I listened to it once, just once, his voice cracking, saying he didn't understand, asking why I would do this to him, begging me to call the bank back, promising again that he'd make the payments. Promises from a man who'd already broken every promise that mattered. I deleted the voicemail. The second call came from his wife. No panic in her voice, just cold, hard rage. "This is financial abuse," she hissed into my voicemail. "We'll sue you. You can't just destroy our credit because you're having a tantrum over nothing. We have rights. We have..." I deleted that one mid-sentence. Didn't need to hear the rest. Because here's the thing about people who've never been held accountable. They think consequences are abuse. They think boundaries are punishment. They think the natural results of their own actions are somehow attacks against them. But I didn't destroy their credit. They did, by not paying the loan, by assuming I'd cover them forever, by treating me like an ATM with no off switch. I just stopped enabling them, that's all. Removed the safety net and let them experience what it actually costs to live the life they'd been living on my dime. 1 week later, 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, the bank repossessed the car, came right to their driveway at 7 in the morning, hooked it up to a tow truck and drove away. I heard about it from Tom, who heard about it from a mutual friend in their neighborhood. Apparently, my son's wife came running out of the house in her bathrobe, screaming at the repo man, making a scene, drawing neighbors to their windows, creating exactly the kind of spectacle she'd always claimed to despise. Because when the polish gets stripped away, when the corporate composure crumbles, what's left is just a person who never learned to handle adversity with grace. My son tried calling me 14 times that day. 14. I counted. Watched each call come through and decline. Each one a little pulse of their panic. Each one a reminder that they'd gambled on my unconditional support and lost. By evening, the call stopped. Maybe they finally understood that I wasn't going to answer, that no amount of desperation would move me, that the bridge they'd burned wasn't going to be rebuilt just because they were suddenly cold. But that wasn't the end of it, because consequences have a way of rippling outward, like dropping a stone in water. The initial splash is dramatic, sure, but it's the circle spreading out from that splash that really show the impact. And the next circle was social, because his wife, remember, lived for appearances, for that corporate polish, for the image of the perfect marriage, the perfect home, the perfect life. She curated her social media like a museum exhibit, posted carefully filtered photos of their house, their car, before it got repossessed, their brunches, their couples' vacations, everything designed to broadcast success and happiness and achievement. And I'd been following it all, not because I cared about their fake life, but because I understood that for people like her, image is everything. And when you want to truly impact someone whose identity is built on perception, you don't attack them directly. You just let the truth do the work. So 1 month after Thanksgiving, I did something I'd thought carefully about. I posted once, just once, on my own social media that I barely used. A simple statement. Sometimes you learn that the people you'd sacrifice everything for wouldn't sacrifice anything for you. Today, I'm grateful for the family members who show up, who respect boundaries, and who understand that love isn't about taking, it's about giving. To those who manipulate and exploit, I hope you find peace with your choices. I've found mine. No names, no specific details, no attacks, just a simple, dignified statement that anyone who knew the situation would understand, and anyone who didn't wouldn't be able to use against me. Within hours, the comments started. Friends who'd known me for decades. People who'd watched me raise my son alone. Colleagues who'd seen me work myself to the bone. Neighbors who knew what kind of man I was. You deserve respect. Real family doesn't treat each other like that. Stay strong. You did the right thing. Some people don't appreciate what they have until it's gone. And then, and this is where it got interesting, people started sharing their own stories, their own experiences with entitled children, with manipulative in-laws, with family members who took and took and took until there was nothing left. My post went viral in my small community. Not internet famous viral, but within our circle, within the network of people who knew us, it spread. People talked, people asked questions. And when they asked my son and his wife what happened, when they tried to spin it as family drama or a misunderstanding, others who'd seen my post pushed back. Sounds like more than drama. What exactly did you do? His dad seems like such a good man. What could make him cut you off? And his wife couldn't handle it. Couldn't handle the scrutiny. Couldn't maintain the perfect image when people were questioning it. So she did what narcissists always do when they're exposed. She lashed out. 3 days after my post, she posted her own response, a long vitriolic rant about how I was mentally unstable, how I'd turned on family for no reason, how they'd tried to help me and I'd rejected them viciously, how I was alone and bitter and taking it out on them. She made herself the victim, made my son the victim, painted me as the villain. But here's what she didn't understand about social capital. You can't fake it forever. You can curate your image, sure. You can post pretty pictures and write sweet captions. But when crisis hits, when the truth starts emerging, people remember how you've actually treated them. They remember the interactions, the patterns, the little moments when your mask slipped. And apparently she'd let her mask slip a lot. With a lot of people. Because instead of rallying to her defense, instead of sympathizing with her victimhood narrative, people started sharing their own experiences with her. She's always been cold. I never felt welcome in their home. She made me feel inferior at that party. Something always felt off about her. Her post backfired spectacularly. Instead of gaining sympathy, she exposed herself, showed everyone exactly who she was under the polish. And when you're someone whose entire identity is built on perception, that's not just embarrassing, it's devastating. She deleted the post within 24 hours, but screenshots live forever. And in our small community, people remember. My son tried to do damage control, posted something vague about family difficulties and private matters and asking for grace and privacy. but by then the narrative was set. People had chosen sides. And most of the people who actually knew me, who'd seen me show up for others, who understood character, chose mine. That hurt him. I know it did. Because he'd always been well-liked, popular, the golden boy with a bright future. And now suddenly people were looking at him differently, questioning his judgment, wondering what kind of man turns on his own father. Good. Let him feel it. Let him understand what it's like to lose respect, to lose trust, to lose standing in your community, not because of lies, but because of truth. The marriage started cracking after that. I heard through the grapevine, small towns, everyone knows everyone, that they were fighting constantly about money, about the car, about the failed plan to move her parents into my house, about whose fault it all was. She blamed him for not managing me better, for not controlling his father more effectively, like I was a problem employee instead of a human being. He blamed her for pushing too hard for the gravy, for turning a request into a demand, for treating me with such blatant disrespect that I'd had no choice but to cut them off. Both of them were right, both of them were wrong. Both of them had failed to understand the fundamental principle. You cannot build your happiness on someone else's surrender. You cannot force people to give up their autonomy and expect them to smile about it. 8 months after Thanksgiving, I heard they'd separated, moved into different apartments. Her parents never did move anywhere. They stayed in their own home, healthy and independent, making me wonder if the whole thing had been a manipulation from the start, a manufactured crisis designed to gain control of my property. The "they can't live alone anymore" story was always suspicious, and now I had my answer. My son tried to reach out during the separation, sent a letter, actual handwritten letter, probably because he knew I wouldn't answer calls or emails. "Dad," it started, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I hurt you in ways I can't take back. I know I chose wrong. I let her convince me that we were helping you, that you were lonely and needed purpose, that moving her parents in would be good for everyone. I didn't see it as the invasion it was. I didn't understand how much I was asking you to sacrifice. And when you said no, when you stood up for yourself, I should have supported you. Instead, I let her pour gravy on you. I sat there and watched and said nothing. I was a coward. I was a bad son, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The letter went on, 2 full pages of apologies and regrets and explanations. He talked about the separation, about realizing his wife had been manipulative, about understanding too late what he'd lost, about wanting to rebuild, to earn back my trust, to be my son again. I read it 3 times, felt the tears I'd been holding back for months finally break free. Because despite everything, despite the betrayal and the pain and the consequences, he was still my son, the boy I'd raised, the child I'd loved, and part of me, the father part, the part that remembered holding him as a baby and teaching him to ride a bike and watching him graduate, wanted to forgive him, wanted to let him back in, wanted to believe people could change. But I didn't respond, not right away, because forgiveness without accountability is just enabling. And trust, once broken, takes years to rebuild, not weeks, not months, years. I put the letter in a drawer, decided I'd sit with it, think about it, pray about it even. Though I'm not particularly religious, just sit with the weight of it and see what felt right. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and slowly, gradually, I started to heal. I spent time with my brother, real time. Coffee on Sunday mornings, fishing trips, long talks about life and loss and what matters. He reminded me that family isn't just about who you're born to, it's about who shows up, who stays, who respects you even when it's hard. I reconnected with old friends, people I'd neglected while I was busy being the perfect father to a son who didn't appreciate it. We had dinners, played cards, laughed, real laughter. Not the forced kind you do when you're pretending everything's fine, but the genuine kind that comes from being around people who actually like you. I started a garden in my backyard. something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. Tomatoes, peppers, herbs, getting my hands in the soil, watching things grow, finding peace in the simple act of nurturing something that actually appreciated the care. I took a trip, just me, drove up the coast, stayed in little hotels, ate at local diners, saw the ocean, felt the sand between my toes, remembered what it felt like to be just me. Not a father, not a provider, not a resource to be managed, just me, a man with a life and dreams and value that wasn't tied to anyone else's needs or expectations. And slowly, so slowly, I almost didn't notice, the pain started to fade, not disappear. You don't stop loving your child just because they hurt you. You don't stop grieving the relationship you thought you had. But the sharp stabbing pain became a dull ache. The ache became a scar, and the scar became just part of my story, not the whole story, just a chapter. 14 months after the letter, almost 2 years after that Thanksgiving dinner, my son showed up at my house, unannounced. Just stood at the door, looking smaller somehow, older, worn down by consequences and reality and the weight of his choices. I watched him through the window for a long moment, debated whether to open the door, whether I was ready, whether he'd actually changed, or if this was just desperation talking. Finally, I opened it, didn't invite him in, just stood in the doorway, waiting. "Hi, Dad," he said, and his voice broke on those two words. "Hello," I said, not warm, not cold, just neutral, waiting to see what he'd come to say. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he started. "I don't even expect you to let me back in your life. I just needed you to know that I understand now what I did, what I took from you, what I failed to protect, and I'm sorry, not because I want something from you, not because I'm trying to manipulate you into giving me another chance, just because you deserve to hear it. You deserve to know that I know I was wrong." He wasn't crying, but his eyes were wet, red, like he'd cried plenty before coming here and was trying to hold it together now. "The divorce is final," he continued. "I'm in therapy, working on myself, understanding why I let myself become that person, why I prioritized her comfort over your dignity, why I thought access to your house was more important than my relationship with you, why I sat there and watched her humiliate you and said nothing. Good," I said simply, because it was good. Growth is good. Accountability is good, even if it comes too late to fix what's broken. "I know I can't undo it," he said. "Can't take back the gravy or the disrespect or the way I sat there and let it happen. Can't erase the fact that I violated your trust and your home and your boundaries. But I want you to know that I'm trying to become someone who would never do that again. Someone you could be proud of, even if you never want to see me again." We stood there in silence, father and son, separated by a threshold and a history and a betrayal that couldn't be erased. "I'm not ready," I said finally, "to forgive, to rebuild, to act like everything's fine. I'm just not." "Ready?" He nodded. "I understand. But maybe someday I will be," I added, surprising myself. "Not today, not soon, but maybe if you actually do the work, if you actually change, if you prove through years, not months, years, that you understand what you did and you'll never do it again." "Years," he repeated. "I can do years. I'll wait as long as it takes." "Don't wait for me," I said firmly. "Don't put your life on hold thinking I'm going to come around and everything will go back to how it was. It won't. Even if we rebuild, it'll be different. Smaller, more careful. There's no going back." "I know," he said. "I'm not waiting for you. I'm working on myself, for myself. Because I don't like who I became, because I want to be better. Even if you never forgive me, I need to be better." That was the right answer. The only answer that might someday make a difference. "Goodbye, son," I said, stepping back to close the door. "Goodbye, Dad," he whispered. I closed the door gently, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just with finality, a chapter ending, maybe not forever, but for now. I walked back to my living room, sat in my chair, the one I'd sat in for 20 years, in the house that was still mine, in the life that was still mine, in the peace I'd fought for and protected and refused to surrender. Later that afternoon, I sat on my back porch, the one where I'd started my garden, where I'd had coffee with my brother that morning, where neighbors now stop by to chat because they actually wanted to see me, not because they wanted something from me. I made myself a cup of tea, not bourbon like in some dramatic movie, just tea. Simple, peaceful, real. The sun was setting, painting the sky in those colors that never get old, orange and pink and purple. Beautiful, peaceful, mine. And I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the pain, the consequences, the loss, and also the gain, the peace, the self-respect, the understanding that saying no isn't selfish, it's necessary, that protecting your boundaries isn't cruel, it's survival, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people experience the natural consequences of their choices. My brother came over, sat in the chair next to mine, didn't say anything, just sat. That's what family does. Shows up, stays quiet when quiet is needed, offers presence instead of advice. "You okay?" he finally asked. "Yeah," I said, and realized I meant it. "I'm okay." He came by, he observed, not a question. He'd probably seen the car. He did. "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That I'm not ready. That maybe someday I will be. That he needs to do the work regardless." Tom nodded, sipped his own tea. "That's fair." "Is it?" I asked. Sometimes I wonder if I'm being too harsh, if I should just forgive him and move on, if holding this boundary makes me the bad guy. "You're not the bad guy," Tom said firmly. "You're a man who demanded respect, who refused to be used, who set boundaries when they were violated. That doesn't make you bad, that makes you healthy." "It feels lonely sometimes," I admitted. "Even with you here, even with my friends. There's this hole where he used to be." "There is," Tom agreed, "but filling that hole with someone who doesn't respect you doesn't make the loneliness better. It makes it worse. At least now you're lonely but free, lonely but at peace, lonely but true to yourself." He was right. As always, he was right. We sat there as the sun finished setting, as the sky turned from colors to darkness, as the first stars appeared. Two brothers, two men who'd survived loss and betrayal and heartbreak and come out the other side. "I'm not alone," I said quietly, more to myself than to him. "No," Tom agreed. "You're not." And I wasn't. Yes, I'd lost a son, or maybe I'd never really had him in the way I thought I did. Maybe he'd always been this person, and I just hadn't wanted to see it. But I had a brother, I had friends, I had neighbors who waved when I walked by. I had a garden growing in my backyard. I had a house that was mine and only mine. I had peace. I'd chosen peace, and peace had chosen me back. That's not a dramatic ending, not a triumphant one, not the kind where everything gets resolved and everyone hugs and the music swells, but it's real, it's honest, it's the truth about what happens when you stand up for yourself. When you refuse to be used, when you set boundaries and enforce them, some people lose you and you lose them, and it hurts. God, it hurts. But on the other side of that hurt is something they can never take from you. Your dignity, your self-respect, your peace. Age doesn't make me weak. It makes me wise. Wise enough to know my worth, wise enough to recognize manipulation, wise enough to understand that love without respect is just control wearing a mask. My decisions don't require anyone's approval, not my son's, not his ex-wife's, not anyone's. They're mine to make. And I made them, and I'd make them again because I'm not alone. I chose peace, and peace chose me back. And that's worth more than any relationship built on my surrender. That's worth everything.